The Galactic Council chambers fell silent as Admiral Han of the Empire stood before the assembled alien representatives. His purple-scaled hands trembled slightly as he activated the holographic display, showing footage that would forever change how the galaxy viewed the small blue planet called Earth. "Honored delegates," Admiral Han began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, "what you are about to see is classified intelligence gathered from our recent encounter with human special operations forces. I must warn you, the footage is disturbing." The hologram flickered to life, displaying the lush jungle world of 442B. What had once been a pristine research colony now bore the scars of something far more terrifying than any natural disaster. The research facility, built with the finest defensive technology in the galaxy, lay in ruins. But it wasn't the destruction that made the alien delegates gasp in horror. It was how precise and surgical the devastation appeared. Commander Aura of the fleet leaned forward in her crystalline chair. "Admiral, our intelligence suggests this facility housed over 3,000 of your finest soldiers, equipped with Class 7 energy shields and quantum pulse weapons. How could a mere human strike force accomplish this?" Admiral Han's gill slits fluttered nervously. "That, Commander, is what we initially believed as well. Our records show that only 12 humans participated in this operation. 12. A collective murmur of disbelief rippled through the chamber. The ambassador, his tentacles writhing with agitation, spoke up. "Impossible. Our species has studied human physiology extensively. They possess no natural armor, no enhanced strength capabilities, no psychic abilities. They are, by all galactic standards, one of the most physically unremarkable species we have encountered." "That," Admiral Han replied grimly, "is where we made our fatal error in judgment." The hologram shifted to show security footage from inside the facility. The timestamp indicated the attack had begun at 3:47 local time, under cover of complete darkness. The soldiers, despite their advanced night vision capabilities, seemed to be fighting shadows. "Observe carefully," the Admiral instructed. "Notice how the humans move. They don't simply run from cover to cover like conventional soldiers. They flow like liquid death through our defenses." The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as human figures, barely visible even on enhanced recordings, seemed to materialize from impossible hiding spots. One moment a corridor would appear empty, the next, 3 guards would collapse silently to the ground while a barely perceptible shadow continued moving deeper into the facility. General of the Hegemony battle cruiser fleet stood abruptly. This must be some form of advanced cloaking technology. No biological entity could move with such stealth. Admiral Han manipulated the hologram controls, zooming in on one particular human operative. The figure wore no visible technology beyond basic combat gear that appeared primitive compared to galactic standards. No energy shields, no powered exoskeletons, no quantum enhancement devices. Enhanced analysis reveals they used only kinetic projectile weapons, chemical explosives, and something our scientists are still struggling to understand, what they call tactical knowledge of their environment. Watch this section. The footage showed a human operative studying the facility's ventilation system for exactly 7 seconds before producing a small device and beginning to climb. Within minutes, the entire facility's air filtration system had been compromised with some form of chemical agent that didn't kill, but rendered the soldiers unconscious within 30 seconds of exposure. "But here is what truly terrifies our military analysts," Admiral Han continued, his voice dropping to an almost whisper. "The humans didn't simply complete their objective and leave. They spent an additional 2 hours in our facility, during which time they accessed our computers, downloaded our tactical databases, studied our weapon designs, and according to our surviving personnel, took detailed biological samples." Ambassador Al of the Trade Federation shifted uncomfortably. "You're suggesting they were conducting research during an active military operation?" "Not suggesting, Ambassador. Confirming." The hologram displayed internal security recordings showing human operatives calmly working at computer terminals while their companions maintained watch positions. "Our interrogation of the survivors revealed that the humans spoke with them extensively, asking detailed questions about military doctrine, our psychological profiles, even our cultural fears and superstitions." The chamber erupted in alarmed chatter. Commander Aura's crystalline features flickered with agitation. "They were studying you like specimens." Indeed, Admiral Han confirmed. But the most disturbing discovery came when we analyzed their communication intercepts. The humans were not operating under standard military protocols. They were having fun. He played an audio recording, translated into Galactic standard. Human voices could be heard making jokes, discussing what they wanted to eat after the mission, and even placing bets on who could complete their objectives faster. One voice clearly stated, "This is almost too easy. I thought alien technology would be more challenging." The ambassador's tentacles had turned a deep shade of purple, indicating extreme distress. "You're telling us that while conducting one of the most sophisticated military operations we've ever documented, the humans were treating it as recreational activity. Our psychological analysis teams have spent months trying to understand this behavior," Admiral Han replied. "The conclusion is disturbing. These humans weren't elite soldiers pushing their abilities to the limit. According to intercepted communications, this was considered light duty compared to their training exercises on Earth." General's massive frame shuddered. What kind of world produces creatures that consider infiltrating a heavily fortified military installation to be light duty? The Admiral manipulated the hologram again, this time showing a three-dimensional map of Earth. Red zones covered massive portions of the planet's surface. Intelligence gathered from various sources has revealed that the human is classified as what they call a. The environmental hazards alone would kill most galactic species within hours. The map zoomed in on various regions. Temperatures ranging from 50 degrees below freezing to over 50 degrees above. Atmospheric pressure variations that would crush or explosively decompress most life forms. Gravity nearly twice what most of us consider optimal. Weather patterns that include electrical storms, frozen water falling from the sky, and wind speeds that exceed most spacecraft engines. "But that's just their environment," Admiral Han continued. "The biological life forms sharing their planet are equally terrifying, creatures weighing several tons with bite forces that could snap our finest battle armor, microscopic organisms that kill through biological warfare, plants that produce deadly toxins. The humans didn't evolve as apex predators. They evolved as survivors in a world trying to kill them every single day." Commander Ara's voice was barely audible, "And they consider this home." "Not only do they consider it home," the Admiral replied, "but they engage in recreational activities that would constitute torture for most species. They deliberately seek out the most dangerous parts of their planet for something they call vacation. They climb mountains in conditions that would freeze most of us solid. They descend into underwater caves that would crush us with pressure. They run across deserts that would dehydrate most species within hours." The hologram showed footage collected by various observation probes. Humans were seen engaging in activities that all logic, jumping from aircraft without immediately deploying parachutes, swimming with predatory sea creatures, climbing sheer rock faces using only their hands and feet. "Our initially assumed these were religious rituals or punishment ceremonies," Admiral Han explained. "Further observation revealed that humans consider these activities fun and relaxing." The chamber had grown completely silent. The implications were staggering. If humans considered living on a relaxing, what did they consider challenging? "The intelligence gathered from their military databases reveals something even more concerning," the Admiral continued. "The operatives who destroyed our facility weren't even from their primary military forces. They belong to what humans call special operations, elite units that undergo training specifically designed to be more challenging than actual combat." He displayed translated human military documents. "Their training includes simulated torture resistance, survival in environments that would kill most galactic species, and psychological conditioning that removes normal fear responses. But perhaps most disturbing is their selection process." The documents revealed selection criteria that seemed designed to eliminate normal, rational thinking. Candidates were required to demonstrate not just physical capability, but what humans termed mental toughness, the ability to continue functioning under conditions that would break most intelligent species psychologically. Analysis of their selection process reveals that they deliberately seek individuals who display what other species would consider psychological disorders, Admiral Han explained. Abnormally high pain tolerance, reduced fear responses, and an apparent inability to recognize when situations are hopeless. Ambassador Al leaned forward. "You're describing sociopaths." That was our initial assessment, the Admiral agreed. However, further study revealed something more complex. These humans maintain normal social bonds, demonstrate empathy toward their companions, and follow strict ethical codes. They're not broken psychologically, they're enhanced beyond what we considered possible for biological intelligence. The hologram shifted to show psychological evaluation reports. Human Special Operations personnel routinely score higher on intelligence tests, demonstrate superior problem-solving abilities, and maintain emotional stability under conditions that would drive most species insane. They're not just physically dangerous, they're intellectually superior warriors. General stood again, his massive frame clearly agitated. Admiral, what you're describing isn't just a military threat. You're suggesting that an entire planet has evolved super soldiers as their normal population. Not their normal population, General. Remember, these are their elite forces. But here's what truly concerns our analysts. According to human military doctrine, these special operations forces represent less than 1% of their total military capability. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates were speaking rapidly in their native languages, creating a cacophony of alien sounds. Commander Aura's crystalline form was flickering rapidly, indicating extreme emotional distress. Admiral Hen raised his hands for silence. There's more. Analysis of human historical records reveals that they have been conducting warfare against each other for their entire recorded history. Not occasional conflicts over resources, but constant, continuous warfare using increasingly sophisticated methods. The hologram displayed human historical timelines. They have developed military tactics through thousands of years of combat against opponents who share their same capabilities. Every strategy, every weapon, every technique has been tested against enemies who possess identical intelligence and physical capabilities. This means, he continued, that when they encounter alien military forces, they're applying thousands of years of refined warfare techniques against opponents who have never faced anything like them. The ambassador's tentacles were now completely still, a sign of deep contemplation. Admiral, are you suggesting that we've encountered a species that has evolved specifically for warfare? Not evolved for warfare, Ambassador, evolved through warfare. There's a significant difference. They didn't develop their capabilities to fight, they developed them to survive fighting each other. When that pressure is applied to external conflicts, the results are? He gestured toward the destroyed facility in the hologram. Well, you see the results. The chamber had grown quiet again as the full implications began to sink in. Earth wasn't just home to dangerous predators. It was home to a species that had been forged by conflict into something that transcended normal military capability. Our recommendation to the Galactic Council is immediate and unanimous, Admiral Han concluded. Under no circumstances should any galactic civilization engage in hostile actions against the human special operations community. They are not simply soldiers. They are the product of a that spent thousands of years teaching them to kill efficiently, survive impossibly, and adapt continuously. The humans call their planet Earth, he said, his voice carrying a note of grudging respect. But after analyzing their capabilities, our military has designated it by a different name, the Forge of Warriors. The hologram faded, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Outside the viewing ports, the stars seemed somehow less friendly, knowing that somewhere among them was a small blue planet where 12 individuals could destroy a galactic military installation while treating it as routine exercise. The age of galactic military supremacy had just ended, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Dr. Synthesis, the galaxy's leading, stood before her research team in the sterile laboratory aboard the research vessel. The past 6 months had been dedicated to understanding something that all conventional wisdom about intelligent life. How human special operations forces maintained psychological stability while performing actions that would break most sapient minds. Initial analysis is complete, Doctor announced to her diverse team of alien researchers. And I must admit, colleagues, our findings challenge everything we thought we knew about the relationship between intelligence and violence. Her assistant, a crystalline being named Resonance of Thought, flickered with curiosity. Doctor, the preliminary reports suggest human special operations personnel demonstrate higher empathy scores than average galactic citizens, yet simultaneously show no psychological trauma from activities that would destroy most minds. This seems contradictory. Doctor activated the holographic display, showing brain scan comparisons between various species. That contradiction resonance is exactly what makes them so terrifying. Let me explain what we've discovered. The display showed neural pathway maps from human brains alongside those of and subjects. Observe the emotional processing centers. In most species, including our own, these regions show significant stress patterns when exposed to violence or life-threatening situations. The neural pathways become overloaded, leading to what humans call post-traumatic stress. She manipulated the display to highlight human brain scans. But look at the human special operations neural patterns. Not only do they not show stress damage, but their emotional processing centers actually become more efficient under extreme conditions. The research team exchanged glances of disbelief. Doctor, a renowned hegemony psychologist, spoke up. Doctor, are you suggesting that violence makes them psychologically healthier? Not exactly, she replied. What we've discovered is that humans possess what we can only term adaptive psychological architecture. Their brains don't simply endure trauma, they incorporate it as functional experience and emerge stronger. She displayed recordings from human training exercises. The footage showed human candidates being subjected to conditions that would be classified as torture by Galactic standards. Extreme physical deprivation, psychological pressure, and simulated life-or-death scenarios. Notice their psychological responses during these exercises, Doctor instructed. Most species would show increasing stress indicators, breakdown of cognitive function, and eventual psychological collapse. Humans show the opposite. The brain scans revealed something unprecedented. As conditions became more extreme, human neural activity didn't deteriorate, it optimized. Stress response systems that would overwhelm other species were being channeled into enhanced decision-making capabilities. It appears that human evolution occurred under such consistently threatening conditions that their brains developed mechanisms to use stress as a performance enhancer rather than a limiting factor, Doctor explained. What we perceive as unbearable pressure, they experience as optimal operating conditions. Resonance of thought's crystalline structure pulsed with agitation. Doctor, this suggests that humans are literally built for warfare at a neurological level. The implications run deeper than warfare, Doctor replied grimly. Analysis of their training protocols reveals something extraordinary. Human special operations forces don't just prepare for combat, they prepare for scenarios that most species would consider impossible to survive. She displayed documentation from human military archives. Their training includes psychological conditioning for situations that our best strategic computers classify as certain death scenarios. They practice maintaining operational effectiveness while injured, while isolated, while believing their mission has failed, and while convinced that they won't survive. Doctor leaned forward in his environmental suit. Are you saying they train to operate effectively while experiencing what should be complete despair? Exactly, but here's what our research has revealed about their psychological mechanisms. The display showed detailed neural pathway analysis. When most species encounter hopeless situations, the brain triggers survival responses that prioritize escape or surrender. Human brains have evolved additional pathways that activate specifically during hopeless situations. The scans revealed neural activity in regions that didn't exist in other species' brains. These areas appear to generate what humans call determination, a psychological state where the impossibility of success actually increases their commitment to continue attempting success. The research team sat in stunned silence as the implications became clear. Doctor continued her presentation, displaying psychological evaluation reports from captured human personnel. During our interviews with human prisoners from the 442B incident, we administered standard psychological evaluation protocols. The results were disturbing. When presented with hypothetical scenarios that should trigger fear responses, the humans instead began analyzing tactical possibilities. She showed the interview recordings. Human subjects, when presented with descriptions of overwhelming odds, didn't show signs of stress or despair. Instead, they became animated, discussing potential strategies and expressing what could only be described as excitement about the challenge. One subject, when informed that he faced certain execution, asked detailed questions about the execution method, the security protocols of the execution facility, and the psychological profiles of his guards. When asked why, he stated that he was gathering intelligence in case an escape opportunity presented itself. Resonance of thought's structure flickered rapidly. He was treating his own execution as a tactical problem to be solved. All of them did, Doctor confirmed. But the most significant discovery came when we analyzed their emotional responses to their fellow humans. Despite showing no fear for themselves, they demonstrated intense protective instincts toward their teammates. The display showed comparative emotional response patterns. When threatened individually, human special operations personnel show minimal stress responses. When their teammates are threatened, their stress indicators spike dramatically, but not in ways that impair function. Instead, the stress appears to enhance their protective capabilities. Doctor was taking extensive notes. So they've evolved beyond self-preservation but retained pack loyalty. It's more sophisticated than pack loyalty, Doctor replied. Analysis of their communication patterns reveals that they form psychological bonds that actually increase individual capability. They don't just fight for each other, they become more dangerous because of each other. She displayed recordings of human special operations teams in action. Observe their coordination patterns. They don't simply communicate tactical information. They provide psychological reinforcement that maintains optimal performance even when individual team members should be psychologically overwhelmed. The footage showed human teams operating with a fluidity that seemed almost telepathic. But audio analysis revealed constant low-level communication, encouragement, humor, tactical updates, and most disturbing of all, expressions of enjoyment. They appear to derive psychological satisfaction from successfully overcoming challenges that should be traumatizing, Doctor explained. Our analysis suggests that human psychology rewards problem-solving under extreme pressure with powerful emotional satisfaction. The more difficult the problem, the greater the psychological reward. The research team was clearly struggling to process these findings. The implications challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligent life. Doctor decided to reveal the most disturbing discovery. Perhaps most significant is our analysis of their long-term psychological health. We expected to find evidence of accumulated psychological damage from their activities. Instead, we found the opposite. She displayed longitudinal psychological studies of human special operations veterans. Individuals with extensive combat experience show enhanced emotional stability, superior problem-solving capabilities, and improved social functioning compared to humans without such experience. Their brains literally become better at being human through exposure to conditions that would destroy other species psychologically, she continued. They don't just survive trauma, they evolve through it. Doctor set down his recording device. Doctor, what you're describing isn't just a military advantage. You're suggesting that humans become more psychologically healthy through activities that constitute psychological warfare against other species. The evidence supports that conclusion, Doctor replied. But the implications extend beyond individual psychology. Analysis of human social structures reveals that their entire civilization is organized around principles that would be considered pathological by galactic standards. She displayed human societal data. They organize their societies around competition, controlled conflict, and continuous challenge. Their entertainment involves simulated warfare, their sports involve controlled violence, their literature celebrates overcoming impossible odds. Their children's games, she added with a note of awe in her voice, involve scenarios that would qualify as advanced tactical training for most galactic military forces. Resonance of thought structure had stabilized into a pattern indicating deep contemplation. Doctor, are you suggesting that human civilization is essentially a galaxy-scale training program for creating super soldiers? Not intentionally, Doctor replied. But the psychological conditioning that produces their special operations forces isn't separate from their normal cultural development. It's an intensified version of how all humans are raised. She displayed comparative childhood development patterns. Human children are routinely exposed to controlled challenges, competitive environments, and psychological pressure that would be classified as abuse by galactic standards. But these experiences appear to strengthen rather than damage their psychological development. The result is a species where even average citizens possess psychological resilience that exceeds our elite military personnel, she continued. Their special operations forces aren't psychological anomalies, they're the logical extreme of normal human development. The team sat in contemplative silence as Doctor presented her final analysis. Our recommendation is immediate revision of all psychological warfare protocols. Standard techniques designed to break enemy morale will likely be interpreted by humans as interesting challenges. Furthermore, she continued, any interrogation techniques that rely on psychological pressure should be abandoned entirely. Based on our research, such pressure will likely make human prisoners more mentally alert rather than more compliant. Doctor looked up from his notes. Doctor, what's your professional assessment of the long-term implications? Doctor paused, considering her words carefully. In my professional opinion, we have encountered something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that has evolved psychological immunity to the conditions that warfare creates. They don't just survive war, they're strengthened by it. She gestured toward the brain scan displays still floating in the holographic field. Every galactic civilization we know has developed military capability despite the psychological cost of violence. Humans appear to have developed military capability because of the psychological benefits of controlled violence. The practical result is that traditional military doctrine, which assumes that sufficient pressure will break any opponent's will to fight, becomes not just ineffective but counterproductive when applied to human forces. Resonance of thought structure pulsed with what could only be described as nervous energy. Doctor, if standard military psychology doesn't apply to humans, how does one defeat them? Doctor's expression grew grim as she delivered her final conclusion. That, colleagues, is the question that may determine whether the rest of galactic civilization survives contact with humanity. Because based on our research, the honest answer is, we don't know if it's possible. The laboratory fell silent as the assembled scientists contemplated a universe where the most psychologically resilient species had also evolved to be the most militarily capable. Outside the research vessel's viewports, the stars seemed somehow more ominous, knowing that somewhere among them was a species for whom war wasn't hell, it was home. Ambassador Prime of the United Galactic Assembly stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge, staring at the small blue planet that had somehow managed to terrify an entire galaxy without firing a single shot beyond their own solar system. 6 months had passed since the 442b incident, and the galaxy's greatest military minds had reached a conclusion that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. The analysis is complete, Ambassador, reported General, the galaxy's supreme military commander. Every strategic computer, every tactical simulation, every war game scenario reaches the same conclusion. Didn't turn from the viewing port. Earth hung in space before them, peaceful and innocent-looking, its blue-white surface giving no indication of the predatory intelligence that had evolved on its surface. Tell me, General, how many scenarios did you run? 17,000 different conflict models, General replied grimly. We simulated conventional warfare, technological warfare, biological warfare, psychological warfare, economic warfare, and even scenarios involving complete galactic cooperation against human forces. And the results? General's breathing apparatus hissed with what could only be described as resignation. In every single scenario, human victory is not just probable, it's inevitable. The ambassador finally turned from the viewing port. Explain. The general activated a holographic display that filled the observation deck. The projection showed the current galactic military situation. Thousands of worlds, millions of ships, billions of soldiers representing dozens of advanced civilizations. We began with our most optimistic scenarios, General explained. Complete galactic unity, total resource mobilization, perfect strategic coordination. Every civilization working together with unified command structure and unlimited funding. The hologram shifted to show simulation results. Even under these ideal conditions, human special operations forces could disable our command and control systems faster than we could coordinate responses. Their ability to operate independently means that destroying our centralized command structure would barely slow them down, while our forces would become completely ineffective. Ambassador studied the data. You're telling me that our strength, unified coordination, becomes our weakness against human tactics. Exactly. Their special operations doctrine assumes that command structures will be compromised, that communication will be impossible, that support will be unavailable. They train every individual operator to function as an independent strategic asset. The hologram displayed human training documentation. While our forces become less effective when isolated, human forces become more unpredictable and therefore more dangerous when operating independently. But surely our technological advantages, the ambassador began. Are meaningless, General interrupted. This was our second major miscalculation. We assumed that superior technology would provide decisive advantage. Human military history reveals the opposite. The display showed human historical conflicts. Humans have a documented pattern of defeating technologically superior opponents through what they call asymmetric warfare. They don't try to match superior technology, they make superior technology irrelevant. The general manipulated the hologram to show specific examples. In their own history, humans regularly defeated opponents with better weapons, better armor, and better defensive positions by attacking the assumptions that made those advantages meaningful. Against energy shields that deflect projectiles, they use kinetic explosives that create shockwaves. Against advanced sensors that detect heat and movement, they use environmental camouflage and remain motionless for days. Against superior firepower, they attack supply lines and maintenance facilities. Ambassador was beginning to understand the scope of the problem. They don't fight the enemy's strengths, they attack the weaknesses that the strengths create. Precisely. And here's the truly terrifying part. Their special operations forces are trained specifically to identify and exploit weaknesses in systems they've never encountered before. They don't need to understand our technology to defeat it. They only need to understand how we depend on it. The hologram showed simulated human attacks on galactic infrastructure. Our civilizations have become dependent on complex technological systems that we assume are too sophisticated for primitive humans to understand. But they don't need to understand them. They only need to understand how to break them. Their training includes what they call improvised demolitions, creating explosive devices from common materials found in any technological society. Every galactic facility contains the materials necessary for human special operations forces to manufacture devastating weapons. The ambassador felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. You're saying that simply by entering our facilities, they can turn our own infrastructure into weapons against us. The simulations confirm it, but that's not even the most concerning aspect of their capabilities. General adjusted the hologram to show intelligence analysis. Our greatest advantage should be our numbers. Even the most capable individual can be overwhelmed by sufficient opposition. However, human special operations doctrine includes something called force multiplication. They're trained to turn enemy numbers against enemy forces. The display showed tactical scenarios. They can create false communications that cause our forces to attack each other. They can trigger defensive systems to target friendly forces. They can create situations where large numbers of troops become liabilities rather than assets. But most disturbing is their psychological warfare capabilities. Remember, these are individuals who derive psychological satisfaction from overcoming impossible odds. The more forces we deploy against them, the more fun they have. Ambassador sat down heavily in his chair. Are you telling me that sending more soldiers against them actually improves their performance? The psychological analysis confirms it. Large-scale operations against human special operations forces would likely result in a feedback loop where increasing our forces would increase their effectiveness exponentially. The general paused, letting this sink in before continuing. But perhaps most concerning is what we learned about their strategic thinking. Human military doctrine doesn't just plan for victory, it plans for victory under conditions where victory should be impossible. The hologram displayed human strategic documents. They have detailed protocols for operations behind enemy lines, with no support, with compromised equipment, with limited ammunition, with wounded personnel, and with the assumption that reinforcements will never arrive. They plan for scenarios where everything goes wrong, and then develop tactics that turn everything going wrong into strategic advantages. Ambassador was struggling to process the implications. General, what you're describing isn't military capability. You're describing something that transcends normal strategic thinking. That's exactly correct, Ambassador. And here's why it makes them unbeatable. They don't plan to win under optimal conditions. They plan to win under conditions where their opponents would consider surrender to be the only rational choice. The hologram shifted to show galactic military doctrine for comparison. Our strategies, like those of every rational civilization, include provisions for surrender when losses become unacceptable. We have protocols for withdrawal when situations become untenable. We have decision-making frameworks for determining when continued conflict becomes counterproductive. Humans appear to have eliminated these concepts from their special operations mindset entirely. They have no protocols for surrender, no frameworks for acceptable losses, no concept of situations too dangerous to continue. Are you saying they're suicidal? The ambassador asked. No, General replied grimly. That would actually be easier to deal with. Suicidal opponents can be defeated by simply allowing them to destroy themselves. Human special operations forces are the opposite. They're pathologically determined to survive and complete their objectives regardless of cost. The psychological analysis indicates that they experience increasing psychological satisfaction as situations become more desperate. The closer they come to failure, the more committed they become to success. The hologram displayed combat simulations. In every scenario we tested, conventional military doctrine would recommend withdrawal or surrender at some point. At those exact points, human special operations effectiveness appears to increase dramatically. They become more dangerous when they're losing, Ambassador asked in disbelief. The data supports that conclusion. Their training includes extensive preparation for what they call worst-case scenarios. When everything has gone wrong, they don't become demoralized. They activate specialized protocols designed to achieve victory specifically under worst-case conditions. General manipulated the display to show the final analysis. Ambassador, our strategic computers have identified exactly one scenario where galactic forces could defeat human special operations, complete withdrawal from all contact. If we never engage them, never threaten them, never provide them with tactical challenges, they remain on there and pose no threat to galactic civilization. The ambassador stared at the peaceful-looking planet through the viewing port. Are you recommending that the entire galaxy adopt a policy of hiding from one species? I'm recommending that we acknowledge reality, General replied. Human Special Operations Forces represent something unprecedented in galactic history, a military capability that becomes more effective under the exact conditions that would neutralize every other known military force. They have evolved beyond the normal limitations that make warfare possible to win. Most conflicts are decided when one side determines that continuing to fight would cost more than surrender. Humans appear to have eliminated the psychological mechanisms that make such calculations possible. The hologram displayed the final strategic assessment. In practical terms, this means that any conflict with human special operations forces would continue until either they achieve their objectives or they are all killed. Since they're also extremely difficult to kill and trained to operate effectively even when severely outnumbered, the probable outcome of any conflict is eventual human victory regardless of initial advantages. Ambassador stood and walked back to the viewing port. Earth continued its peaceful rotation, betraying none of the deadly intelligence that called it home. What's your professional military assessment, General? If the galaxy found itself in unavoidable conflict with human forces, how long would our civilization survive? General was silent for a long moment before answering. Based on analysis of human special operations capabilities, our strategic computers estimate that complete galactic military collapse would occur within 18 to 36 months. Not defeat, Ambassador. Collapse. Our military forces wouldn't just lose, they would become psychologically incapable of continuing to fight as human tactics eliminated our command structures, turned our technologies against us, and demonstrated that our most powerful weapons were ineffective. The simulations suggest that most galactic military forces would simply stop functioning as organized entities after experiencing human special operations warfare. The ambassador felt the weight of galactic history settling on his shoulders. And this is their special operations forces, What about their regular military? We don't have sufficient data to analyze their conventional forces, General admitted. But if their special operations represent the extreme end of their military capability, and if they make up less than 1% of their total military strength, as intelligence suggests, then their conventional forces would likely be sufficient to occupy and hold every strategic location in galactic space simultaneously. Ambassador turned back toward the general. In your professional opinion, what should be the galaxy's official policy toward humanity? General deactivated the holographic display and stood at attention. Ambassador, my recommendation is immediate and unequivocal. Under no circumstances should any galactic civilization take hostile action against human forces. Any species or government that attacks human interests should be considered to have committed suicide and should be treated as a threat to galactic survival. Furthermore, I recommend that we establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity immediately, with the explicit goal of ensuring that they never have reason to consider galactic civilization a threat to their interests. The ambassador looked back at Earth one final time, and if they decide that they want galactic civilization to serve their interests. General's silence was answer enough. Later, as the diplomatic vessel departed Earth's solar system, Ambassador dictated his final report to the Galactic Council. It is the unanimous conclusion of our military analysis that humanity represents a paradigm shift in galactic power structures. They have evolved military capabilities that transcend conventional strategic limitations. Our recommendation is immediate classification of human space as a no-conflict zone with special diplomatic status. Furthermore, we recommend that any future galactic policies be evaluated for their potential impact on human interests. We have encountered something unprecedented, a species that makes warfare unwinnable for their opponents not through superior technology or numbers, but through the elimination of the psychological concepts that make defeat possible. The age of galactic military competition is over. The humans have won a war that the rest of us didn't even know we were fighting. As the message was transmitted across galactic communication networks, military forces throughout the galaxy quietly began updating their strategic databases. In the threat assessment files, a new entry appeared next to the small blue planet. Avoid all contact. Species classification, predator. And in the darkness between the stars, human special operations forces continued their training, unaware that an entire galaxy had just declared them the victors of a war that had never been fought.